Hi everybody and welcome to tonight's event on the career resolutions hosted by the Cork Society of Chartered Accountants. On behalf of the Cork Society, my name is Rachel McCann and I'm delighted to welcome Dave Riordan to tonight's session. So thanks a million, Dave. Just for everybody's purpose here, Dave, just to give a little bit of background about yourself. Dave is on the career development team with Chartered Accountants Ireland, where his speciality lies around the recruitment of accountancy, audit and advisory positions. Dave also is a career coach and he advises chartered accountants in a number of issues such as career development and interview prep. So as we're all in January, great to get that advice as we kick off into new career years. So Dave, I'll hand over to you. And as I said, if there's any Q&As, please feel free to drop them into the box. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, guys, really nice to connect with anyone in this fun year that we've had. And Happy New Year to everyone, if we're allowed to still say that. I know we're well into January now at this stage. And look, thanks to Rachel and Fiona for this opportunity to connect with the members in Cork. I was down there actually, I think it was 2019, where we were able to meet in person. It's virtual now, obviously, but look, hopefully this is a useful session. It's a bit of a catch-all. I know Fiona was indicating that the main focus of this, at the start of this year will be around the market and virtual interviewing and a bit of a skills update then and look at skills for the year ahead. I have a couple of other things thrown into it that we can touch on that might be useful for the year ahead. But just to give you a bit of a background to myself, as Rachel said, I'm about 12 years in recruitment myself, 10 years in agency and about 2 years in the Institute, or 2.5 years in the Institute now with Karen Lanigan's team, the career and career advisory team. I'm a member of the Institute myself. I was FCA last year. And hopefully that kind of gives me an insight into where you're all coming from, no matter what level, whether you're newly qualified, middle sort of 5 to 8 years PQE or FCA yourself. So like this evening is about trying to get you thinking ahead about your career and focusing in on that. A lot of people don't really spend enough time thinking about their career project, as I've started calling it recently. Because it very much is a project that you need to stay on, from month to month and almost week to week, depending on whether you're casually keeping an eye on the career path or actively looking for a new role. So we'll kick off with, hopefully these slides are well laid out. We'll kick off with a little bit of a view of the market, I think, for a start. Hopefully that's the next slide that comes up. What we're going to cover is, the fact that this is, an urgent project for a lot of people. We've come through a funny year with 2020 where I'll talk about the market in 2020 and how it's impacting the view as we head into 2021. Urgent is a kind of a dramatic word to put on it, but whether you're actively looking in quarter one or whether you're kind of have a notion of maybe making a move in your career in 2021, you should really treat it as a bit of a project and map it out, and we'll touch on how best to do that. With that comes a decision between practice, industry and financial services, and whether you want to remain in one of them, move into another, pivot into a different area, and so on. We'll touch very briefly on building your network. If you're an FCA, your network is extremely important, and we'll touch on that a little bit and how to use LinkedIn in that regard, because look, we're not meeting face to face and having coffees in person and having events at the moment. So there's different ways of building your network at the moment. The market 2021, staying close to your institute more now than ever. 2020, I was reminding a lot of members that, staying close to your institute, leveraging the influence, the networking and the connectivity that the institute gives to you is very important at the moment, and we'll look at ways of doing that. We'll mention the career pathway which you may or may not have seen as a hub on the Institute website, and have a look into that a little bit, because that's the piece that touches on your skills, and that will give you a bit of an insight as to where your skill shortages might be at whatever level you're at in your ACA life cycle. Touch on personal branding. Some of you may or may not be aware of kind of personal branding being very important in this day and age, and how that can influence your career curve, your job search, etc., and the emphasis you need to put onto that. LinkedIn, a little bit on CVs, but more so interviews, because the changing face of interviewing with virtual interviews has shaken things up a little bit over the last year. It's been a learning curve for everybody, myself included, and a few tips, tricks, and interviewing virtually, and then there's other bits of mentoring and stuff like that. Up front, January is a good time to think about what's going to happen to your career in the year ahead, and how to approach that. Like, a lot of members would ring me and sort of say, I just need to figure out where I am in my career. I've hit a bit of a stagnant point, or I'm in a bit of a comfort zone at the moment, and I need to shake it up or figure out where I'm going and what I should be doing, and they ask my suggestions. An awful lot of the time it starts with a proper career plan. Like, sit down, do a bit of self-analysis, know yourself, examine the market, explore your options, get informed, go through a research phase for a few months, then start making informed decisions and focused kind of applications with a view to making a clever move. So that's the cycle in terms of a career plan. You need to structure that with goals, like, and really, it's funny, like, so many members would in years gone by would have spent months planning out their summer holidays and invested loads of time planning out where you're going on holidays and everything to do with that. And when it comes to actually making a move or a career step or change, they do it within a number of weeks, and it kind of comes on top of them pretty quickly. So it's always good to kind of keep chipping away at it. And the best, the most successful members I've seen down through the last decade are never really the ones that are, placing their exams and stuff like that. The most savvy members are the ones who have stayed close to the market, stayed really informed, networked really well, and had a constant conversation around their career, their ambitions, and are very clear on their goals, well defined, and they're very strategic about how to step through on a year-to-year, to achieve their medium and long-term goals. So that's just a little bit of a reminder about the structure of getting a career plan together. Equally, that can be, if you're a newly qual or in the first few years as a young professional, you might want to start thinking about what sector you want to build your career in. Not for profit. Do I want to work for ethical companies or for a very niche kind of sector? Because it aligns with something I really enjoy in my personal life. Have I come from a financial services kind of background, and do I have ambitions to hit London City, etc.? Do I love aircraft leasing, but hate funds, etc.? So you'll see a little bit of a kind of a guide there. It gets you thinking about what company, what role, what options are out there. It's the one thing, when I qualified, I really was clueless, and I think still an awful lot of newly quals are like this. When they qualify, they fall into stuff 3, 4, 5 years later. They're in a bit of a track where they didn't really envisage that they would be working in this particular kind of area or whatever, and they try to back out of it into another area. So that comes back to planning, goals, research, and knowing the market. And we'll come to that in a minute in terms of understanding the market. So market in 2021. So last year was really funny. Obviously, you know, things fell off a cliff in February, and we all just sort of treaded water through to April and May when it actually picked up again a little bit. What we started to see was a bit of a schism in the market in a sense of it almost split into two halves. You had, you know, sectors such as hospitality, and leisure, entertainment, etc. Everything on that side of the fence was really struggling, whereas, you know, technology, pharma, healthcare were doing very well and still are. So, you know, it's not like a normal economic dip in the market where everything kind of suffers. It's split in two. So it's worthwhile being aware of that, and it's worthwhile keeping yourself informed as to what sectors are doing reasonably well out of this current circumstance. And, you know, you might find that you want to veer towards those from a risk averse kind of perspective with your career path. As you move forward, you might want to lean towards those sectors that are buoyant and they're actually doing well at the moment, if at all possible. Recession, I don't know. I mean, you know, Brexit is still kind of impacting on things at the moment, so it remains to be seen how that impacts in 2021. You know, coupled with COVID, it could mean that things, you know, get a little bit tighter. Just saying to Rachel there before the session that, you know, since November, she's found it very busy from a practice perspective. I've actually found it quite busy right the way through in December into January this year. Quite busy on the recruitment front. There's a lot of activity. For whatever reason, you know, it is busy. There are still roles out there. It's, you know, there are more options for the newly qual and young professional up to 8-10 years qualified. It gets a little tighter once you move into that FCA space. And employers do get a little bit more selective if you're looking for higher level salaries, and there is a bit more competition from FCAs out there at the moment that are looking as well. There's quite a few. You know, in relation to Cork and the Southwest region, I have roles in Cork, I have roles in Kerry, I have roles in Tip. Not massive numbers, but that's very encouraging. I have a practice in Waterford that's looking, you know, so there's plenty of activity there, and it has to be said that not all roles are advertised on jobs forums and jobs boards. An awful lot of them are under the radar, you know, and this is where the research comes in and just kind of doing your homework on the market and maybe selecting companies that you want to work for and exploring what opportunities with those. But my read on it is that, look, Dublin is always going to be a little bit busier in terms of opportunities and salaries and so on, a little bit. But my read at the moment is that Cork and the Southwest is going quite well. I know Cork is very multinational and PLC based. There's a lot of tech PLCs and so on. But one thing I'm seeing at the moment, it's a real trend, is practice is actually quite busy. I think Rachel echoed that, and I have a lot of practices all over the country that are looking for additions to their teams at all levels, you know, and they're hard to find. So if you've enjoyed practice, if you've enjoyed audit and so on, you know, and you're looking for a step up, there's certainly opportunities in that regard. You know, so we're in January. You're thinking about a move maybe in the months ahead or the year ahead. I'd say step into that research phase, start market mapping, set up a spreadsheet, and start populating it. You know, the Irish Times Top 1000 website is a really good starting point just to kind of get a bit of a picture for yourself. Anyway, that's a bit on the market for 2021. You might have a few questions on that, perhaps towards the end, because I'm probably not hitting everything on it. I mentioned there about staying close to your institute. Sorry, that slide is a little bit more relevant for, I think I mentioned Midwest and Cork on it. But the point stands, like I've spent the last year saying to a lot of members that, they should stay as close as possible to the institute. There aren't events going on, but there's opportunities to get involved with committees. There's an awful lot of webinars online at the moment. We've really fleshed out the Chartered Accountants website. The career section on there has a huge amount of information, and it's well worth wading through, because it's actually been very tailored towards the last year that we've had, and the challenges around that. Get involved with the institute groups, the Cork Society group on LinkedIn. Download the Chartered Accountants app on your phone. And if you're really bored, well, I shouldn't say that, but get all your back issues of Accountancy Ireland and browse through them. Keep them on your nightstand, and it can be extremely informative doing that. It actually tells you what's going on in the market, very particularly from an accountancy perspective. So you'd be surprised what you can glean from just literally browsing through the last 10 issues of Accountancy Ireland. Yeah, Facebook, Insta, Twitter, all the social media. Like, we have a full marketing team in the institute that are on social media on a weekly basis, and it's well worth getting yourself tuned into all of that, and stay close to Fiona as well, in terms of connectivity. So the reason I say that is because I know an awful lot of newly quals. I did it myself. When you get the exams, you burn the books, and you kind of start into a new role, perhaps. The tendency is to just kind of distance yourself from the institute a little bit and kind of focus on work. Whereas it's then, like, those years after you qualify that are the most powerful to actually stay really close to the institute. So just a comment on that as well. Looking at, so the other thing that Fiona mentioned was around skills and upskilling within 2021, and consolidating your skill set. A good portal to start with this is the career pathway on the Institute website. As you can see here, it literally splits up the life cycle for an ACA into 4 different segments, right through from newly qualified into developing, leadership, and kind of C-level almost. And it indicates what sort of skills you need to be picking up at each phase of your career pathway. So it defines it out and splits it out really well, everything from technical leadership and other commercial kind of skills. And it's well worth having a scan through. You'll see the benefits of it here. It's very easy to follow, maps it out very well, and etc. This is an example of when you click into that, it'll split it out between 3 different core skills. And then it goes, if you click into each of those, it actually goes into it even further as to what sort of skill sets you need to be picking up and at what level. So you might be a young professional with 5 years PQE. You can go in and have a look at what the expectation might be around your leadership skills at that point. Should you be managing a team of 10 people or 1 person or not at all? Or, it'll give you a bit of a steer on that. And that links directly in with kind of the sort of CPD courses and networking virtual events that you should be looking at through the Institute then as well. There's so much virtual classrooms going on and webinars at the moment that it's easy to take advantage of those, and there's a lot of really good information online there in the Institute website. So well worth checking out. Another sort of side comment around your personal brand, which you might be very tuned into or you might not really be aware of, but it's worth a mention at the outset of a year, because like and I only came to realize this after qualification myself, as a chartered accountant, ACA or FCA, you have a personal brand whether you know it or not. Okay, so it's down to you to kind of take ownership of it and manage it. And you could a simple way of starting with this is to look at your LinkedIn profile and, what that says about you. Everything from the visual in terms of your professional photograph, right down through the details you put in about your career path to date, and the keywords that you use within that. You may be the level of chartered accountant that has written articles and published details, in which case you want to get that up on your LinkedIn profile. You want to, your personal brand is something that allows you to raise your visibility out in the market as well. So if it's a case that you're looking to make a move in the year ahead, you want your personal brand to be a little bit more prominent. Okay, so there's lots of different mechanisms for doing that. In terms of entering conversations, entering groups, managing your personal network, and upping your kind of network activity, and we'll touch on that as well. But equally, your online personal brand is very important. And like what I'm saying a lot at the moment is, find your CV is your sales document, if you like, and it's important to have that as an evolving document and constantly chipping away, and maybe even have a few different versions of it. But what's happening is that your LinkedIn profile is becoming a real appendix to your CV. It's the first place that any potential employer will go to as an added feature to your CV, if that makes sense. So it's very important that you mind, develop, and look after that personal brand that you have and what other people think about you, and as you can see from the slide there. A good book on that note, I mean, it's actually a member that has written it, Veronica Canning, that the Institute sells, is Your Brand. And I highly recommend getting your hands on this if you're looking for something to read and intent on a career switch during the year. It'll definitely assist. I mentioned LinkedIn. Look, at this stage, we know how big a tool it is, and how important it is as well. We did a lot of talks last year for FCAs very specifically. I think there's a lot of FCAs in this evening, in terms of how important it is to take ownership and manage that LinkedIn profile, and use keywords. I have a full document, and there's details on the website about developing your LinkedIn profile and making sure you're doing all the right things with that. It's such, you can see from the slide here, it's such an important tool. If you're looking at raising your profile, if you're looking at making a move, it's just such an essential piece. If there's questions on this at the end of the thing, we can go into it a little bit more in a bit more detail. I have full presentations and documents that I can send on in relation to this. But really what it links into is your network. Like I said, in this day and age, it's very hard to meet people for cups of coffee and kind of, I suppose, network in person. So LinkedIn is the go-to, and it is the way to build your network. And if we're looking at New Year's resolutions, your personal brand and your personal network are two really big ones that is worth reminding members of, because the reality of making a career move is that more often than not, they're the biggest pieces in it. Like so many members who are FCA particularly will make a move through their personal network, and it's that piece that becomes vital. This just outlines really how to connect in through LinkedIn and build that network. I mean, I would say a good tip is to link in with 5, 10, 15 new connections on LinkedIn every single week. Make a point of doing it on a Friday. That could be selecting 10 CFOs in a sector that you really like, and sending them a polite message saying, I'm a member of the Institute like yourself, if they are, and delighted to connect. More often than not, they'll connect in with you. And I've indicated that there in the last point as well. I think it's just a really good habit. And what happens then is your LinkedIn feed becomes a bit more informed about what those people are doing, what those businesses and what that sector is doing. And it's a nice, easy way of doing of the research coming to you and for you to stay really informed about what's going on. Equally, set up the alerts from jobs boards. You mightn't be looking. You're going to get sent an awful lot of rubbish if you just type in financial accountant or financial controller or internal auditor. You get lots of specs sent on to you. You can ignore them, but it gives you it lets you take the temperature of the market. It gives you a sense of what companies are hiring. It gives you a sense of what employers are looking for in their specs and in terms of filling roles as well. So it can be a good way of doing your research passively. So just on to like virtual interviews, which was another kind of core piece that Fiona had mentioned we were going to look at this evening. So some challenges that we found over the last 12 months that members have had with them, like, so, there's the obvious stuff, technology not working. My wife's in the other room here in the study doing online webinar stuff as well. So, between that and PlayStation, Wi-Fi is under strain. So you need to keep an eye on whether you need to use a hotspot to boost your Wi-Fi connections. Laptops switching off because the battery was low is another one that's happened to me in the past as well. So, lack of personal interaction is another kind of key feature of interviews. A lot of first round interviews are being done, nearly all of them are being done by Zoom or Teams or whatever nowadays. So, I've always said that phone interviews are like one-dimensional, and I hate them. I think it's very hard to get a sense of a person through a phone interview in reality. Zoom interviews and Skype interviews are very two-dimensional, and there's a certain way to come on at those that, there's certain advantages to be sure, but there's a certain way that you can leverage those to your advantage, and there's a certain way that you need to approach them as well, and we can look at that in a second. But you do lose a bit of the body language and the interactive piece as well. So it's good to be aware of that. As I said here, building rapport, no handshake, and the body language. So just be aware of that heading into those. And then once you're aware of that, you can compensate a little bit. It doesn't mean you over dramatize yourself or you gesticulate anymore, I suppose, but it's just being aware of that from an EI kind of perspective. Like touching on that stuff again, we all know how the various different platforms at this stage, we're all Zoom experts. Look, obvious tips, fly through it. Make sure you're really familiar with the technology being used. Research in advance. Make sure you're familiar with all the features on it, the tech and elements within the capabilities. Make sure your microphone's working, your camera's working. That might mean doing a test or logging on a few minutes early. Wi-Fi we've mentioned. Headphones can be advantageous as well, just to keep noise reduction. Room setup, make sure you're undisturbed. Same kind of rules apply for maybe a phone interview in this regard. Lighting, desk, etc. Make sure it's all professionally reflective of where you're coming from. The background in the room, mobile phone off, and plug in your laptop. And all obvious, simple stuff, but look, it's good to have a little bit of a reminder, I suppose, going into it. I mentioned like some of the benefits of virtual, like, because it can be challenging. It can be a little kind of difficult, and the time lag, the delay on someone speaking sometimes it takes a little bit of adjusting to. But some of the advantages to it can be you can relax a little bit more. You don't have someone necessarily eyeballing you, so you have a little bit more time to think. You're in your own surroundings. You can be a bit more comfortable maybe with your drink beside you, your coffee or your water. You can fidget the pen if it makes you a bit more comfortable, and you can read your notes as well off screen a little bit as well. You don't have to maintain eye contact as much, because more often than not, if you're looking at the screen, you're not looking at the camera and so on. So there's no expectation really around that. There were just a couple of things I thought actually that make a virtual interview a little more comfortable. So they're worth noting. These are just a few tips then around the interview itself. Again, some of you'll probably know all this stuff anyway, and we're get close to kind of wrapping up. But if you've got interviews coming up in Q1 or Q2, first off, if you want to check in with the careers team and get a bit of an interview prep, that's why we're here. That's why you pay your subs. So make sure to utilize the careers team in that regard. But just a few quick tips on that. Make sure you're listening to the employer. They probably start off by telling you a lot about the role you're applying for and so on. Use that information, for maybe a few good questions towards the end. Lean forward, look interested, good on eye contact. The same applies for virtual interviews online, and as always, you still have to get your personality across. Because the reason I mention that, it's a two-way street. If you don't like the interviewer and you're going to be reporting directly to them and you don't get a good feel from them, there isn't a kind of a connection or a warmth. Sometimes that can be an influencing piece on your decision. Sometimes it can be a huge influencing decision piece, so they need to get to know you a little bit, particularly in the early interviews, and vice versa. So even if it's a formal interview, make sure you get a bit of personality across, confidence, etc. Most interviews are very, even if they're kind of competency based, or if they're kind of old school standard CV interviews, really you should go into any interview with 4 or 5 key stories about your value add and your key achievements in your back pocket. It's essential to have examples. It illustrates, and they're very powerful. And I really wouldn't go into any interview in any, whether it's formal, informal, or very competency oriented, without a selection of really good stories about why I am really good for this job. So that's just kind of a basic comment. Know the spec, know your CV, and know some really good questions going into it. Really good questions to wrap up are very important. They can often be the differentiator between candidates. If someone really understands it to the point that they're asking excellent questions. Sometimes remuneration needs to be addressed head on. If a recruiter isn't involved and hasn't kind of teed up that whole remuneration piece, you need to make sure there isn't a bridge too far, or you're on the same page in terms of remuneration, so you can politely touch on that one as well. And if you're coming towards the end of an interview and it suits to say, I'm actually quite like, this is my favorite role, or I'm in the mix for 2 other opportunities at the moment, but I really like this one, and the challenge it presents. It can be sometimes worthwhile saying that. And if like that, if you've got other activities on the moment, it's good to let an employer know where your process stands as well. So to an abrupt ending, there might be a couple of questions out of that. We didn't go into the personal networking piece particularly heavily. We touched on the personal branding and the career pathway. There's probably other tips there for the year ahead. I think we've hit some of the main ones there. But as mentioned earlier on, look, the careers team is there for you to use as a sounding board at any stage during the year. we're here for CV advice, interview preparation, and mock interviews. Or if you're just looking at trying to formulate a kind of a strategy around your career, I'm doing an awful lot of those calls at the moment, and Zoom calls with members who've come through a funny kind of a year. I've had a lot of members who have realized suddenly that they have families, that they have parents, and they want to do part-time. They want to take a bit more of a work-life balance, or that they're actually just completely stuck in a comfort zone or stagnant and want to shake things up. So it's really mixed things up a little bit over the last year, and no doubt 2021 is going to be similar and challenging and exciting, for careers. So lean on us as much as possible. Remind your peers and colleagues that are members as well that we're here, and we provide a recruitment service as well as a career advisory service. We wear two hats. So look, that's it for me. I'm more than happy to take a few questions and on any of that or anything else. That's me, Rachel. Back to
Great,
you.
thanks, Dave. Definitely food for thought there, I think, for a lot of us to maybe take away and consider a few things as well. I have the quick Q&A box open if there's anybody there that would like to share, or if anybody wants to jump on and ask Dave directly as well. No problems there either. We have one question in. Thanks, Sinead. Dave, would the careers team have a sample CV template that they could share?
Yep, absolutely. We have one, Sinead, that we've been using actually for the last few years. It's a basic kind of a shape. It probably ascribes to that big four kind of shape, I suppose. And probably what we need to do is have a few different versions. So it's a good reminder for us. But we do have a template that I could send on if you want to drop me a line, Sinead. The one thing around what I would say about CVs is, and this is a tip actually that a director from one of my previous agencies, when he was doing a talk, mentioned, and it's stuck with me for years and years, because I see it day in, day out with member CVs coming into me. The biggest thing that people forget, rather than mistake, is that they don't ask themselves, so what, on their CV. So as you kind of put in your recent experience, your last few roles, and then underneath it, you put responsibilities and duties, and you have all these bullet points and a bit of a description about what you were doing. What a lot of people don't ask themselves is the so what question. What was the value add in terms of what I was doing in that job? I managed 5 people. That was part of my responsibility, but it's hard to get context out of that. They might have all hated your guts, or they might have all loved you, and been a brilliant team. So it's good to give context, value add. What a lot of people do with that piece on their CV is they put in a little segment underneath their role for key achievements, and they list out maybe 3 really big key achievements that they've made in the more recent role. And it's a nice way of just splitting it out and highlighting, I've done this for my previous employer, so that's what I'm bringing to you, and being really stark about it. So just decide on that.
Thanks, Dave. The questions are starting to fly in now. So Mary has taken a career break for 2 years. She's now looking to get back to work part-time. How to put yourself forward, having that gap in your CV?
Yeah. First off, being immediately available is a real advantage, Mary. So it allows you to look at temporary and contract work as well as within that part-time frame. Now, it's worth saying that, if you're FCA, and I don't know whether you are or not, but that, particularly for part-time, that personal network is really important, and working that personal networking and everything from the GA club you're in or the golf club you're in, and letting people know that you're keeping an ear out for something at the moment, and having a think about your own kind of group of connections, what they do, where they work, and whether they might be good to sort of have a chat with. and see if they know anyone. And also then ex-colleagues that you would have worked with in the past where they've moved on to, and having a look at the companies they're working in. That's where LinkedIn is so powerful. It helps you kind of sit down, brainstorm your kind of personal connectivity, and then kind of go, oh, right, actually, I wonder what they're doing now. Have a look at LinkedIn, have a look at their profile, see where they are now, connect back in with them and say, look, I wonder, could I just pick your brains? Would you be open to a quick call, or, you know, maybe a suggestion for me? And just chat to loads of people. Like, raise your activity level, raise the conversation, talk to everybody. And that's the best way to get back in, particularly on part-time roles. Agencies don't do a lot on. I'd almost just take that off the table. The Institute, you can pop your details onto me. We do get more than our lion's share of part-time roles, but I'd start with that. And there are surprisingly some roles that we've hit in the last year where they actually are very suited, and the hiring manager knows that they're very suited to someone coming back into the market and just wants to get a foothold. So yeah, you know, I'd look at it from that perspective. Maybe that's a starting point, Mary.
Great, thanks, Dave. There's a bit of feedback and also a question in this one, so it's been a really helpful session. Thanks, Dave. And then, how can the careers team help CAI members based abroad regarding different job markets, interview scenarios, CV versus resume? Great
question. Lovely. Yesterday morning, I was talking to a member in Toronto who's great candidate over there. 3-4 years PQE, worked with great companies, completely taking stock on her career at this point, and had the wherewithal to connect in with us. And she's like, I asked her actually why, how, you know, and what brought her to connecting in with the careers team in the institution. She said she'd seen something a year ago, and she's on a bit of a campaign at the moment, talking to her mentors, talking to ex-colleagues, talking to a couple of good recruiters in Toronto, and so on, and included us in that. And I was delighted to hear that, because, you know, it's important that the institute community know that there is a careers team there for them that has their back and will give unfiltered, unbiased, honest kind of impressions in terms of the market and career paths, which you won't get from an agency. Now, from an international perspective, what can we do for you? Gillian Duffy is our international correspondent, if you like. She links in with all the institutes from Australia, Canada, Middle East, the UK, etc. So we're getting closer and closer as an institute to all our compatriots internationally. We'll be able to link you in with the institute's affiliates abroad, so immediately you'll be able to tap into a kind of a ready-made personal network there to leverage, and you know, like that, there's a template of how to go about a job search, whether you're at home or internationally. Now, the first thing I did say to that girl yesterday morning was, I don't know the market in Toronto, but if you're approaching any market, there are certain things you do need to do. There is certain mechanisms to a job search, and certain things not to forget to do. You'll actually see it on the website for chartered accountants. There's a job search checklist there of about 50 different things that you can go in and literally tick off and kind of go, yeah, I know all that stuff. I'm doing 80% of that. There's 5 really good points that I need to be doing. And that applies either internationally or at home in Ireland. So, you know, and sometimes, like that girl yesterday, it's nice just to kind of talk to someone back in Ireland and get a sense of what's happening back in Ireland if you're planning on coming home in a year or two, you know. So, Sinead.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. I actually moved back from Australia myself about 4 years ago, and that was kind of the route I took as well. That's similar, kind of reaching out, see what was around at home, and seeing as well on the Chartered Accountants website what was available. So definitely good advice there. I don't see any questions on the box, and we might give people just one more minute if there is a question. But look, just on behalf of the Cork Society, Dave, thanks a million for doing tonight's session. I think it's been really worthwhile and some good advice for people both at home and abroad. So just thank you. I'm conscious it is late in the evening, so thanks for facilitating such a late evening, and also thanks to Fiona, our guru of Zoom in the background, for facilitating all of the slides and everything for this evening as well. Just on behalf, I think that is the end of the questions, so I think we can wrap it up there, Dave.
Yeah, likewise, Rachel. Thanks a million to yourself and Fiona. And hopefully I'm back down in Cork this time next year. We can do all this in person. But look, the final message is talk to me, drop me an email or give me a call at any stage in the weeks, months ahead. And happy to chat to members from Cork at any stage.
That's great. Thanks, Dave, and thanks everybody for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Take care. Thanks, everybody.